Thank you, Erica, and welcome everyone. We are delighted to have you with us today. We have a terrific panel to share some wonderful thoughts and ideas about where we are and where we're heading, we hope, as an industry now and into the next year. And we have a lot of you out there, so we'll get started right away. I do want to introduce our panel, although I think you know most of the folks that we have with us today. We have many of our CMOs from the industry with us. We have Dan Levy from Clear Channel Outdoor. We have Jody Sinisi from OUTFRONT Media, Tommy Teeple from Lamar Advertising. Joining us for the first time is Esther Raphael, who's the new CMO from Intersection. Welcome, Esther. We're glad to have you.
Welcome, Esther.
Thank you, guys.
Everybody, shout out to Esther.
Hey, Esther.
Yes.
But before we get started, there's someone else new that I'd like to introduce to the industry officially today, and that is Christina Radigan. Christina joins us this week as the new OAAA Chief Marketing Officer. So Christina, welcome. You joined us on Monday. It was your first day. You were up here in Washington. We had a good day together, and I know you're really excited to get started. You want to tell us a little bit about you and what brought you to OAAA and some of the things you're hoping to achieve as you move into this new role for the industry?
Yeah, well, I have 3 days under my belt, and I am so excited to be here, and I'm so excited to serve as the next CMO of OAAA. I know I certainly have very big shoes to fill, and for those of you who don't know me, I come to the OAAA with over 20 years of advertising agency experience, and 15 of those were actually recently at Omnicom Media Group. So with that experience of working so closely with agencies and advertisers, I really aim to truly unite the out-of-home sellers and the buyers much more closely together than ever before. I am so excited about the opportunity that I feel out-of-home has right now. We have unprecedented that we really truly never had before, and it spans from planning all the way through to attribution. And that, combined with automation and programmatic, I feel that we are so well positioned to really prove out our value proposition and ultimately gain greater share of the omnichannel media pie, if you will. So to kind of get things started, I want to roll up my sleeves. I want to get to know as many members as possible. I want to understand what their needs are and how the OAAA can serve them better. And to kick that off, I am very excited to listen in to this great panel of our esteemed CMOs in the industry. So thank you so much for the warm welcome, Stephen. I'm again looking so forward to this opportunity. So thank you.
We're delighted to have you, Christina. Everybody say hi to Christina.
Welcome. Hi, Christina, and welcome to the NFL.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
You have a great group here that will support you in tremendous ways. So welcome. And then one other person who I want to introduce today, last but not least, is Jean-Luc Decaux, who's joined us. And Jean-Luc is not technically a CMO. However, we consider him an unofficial CMO in our group here. But Jean-Luc, of course, is the co-chair of JCDecaux in North America here. But he also serves as the OAAA marketing chair and has for several years, and is as well versed as anyone in marketing our industry. So Jean-Luc, welcome to you as well. And I want to start off with a question to Jean-Luc. Obviously, Jean-Luc, the global pandemic has changed the way we do business here in America and around the world. Can you identify one or more significant ways that your company, JCDecaux, has changed its business approach this year because of the pandemic?
Well, it's true that obviously, this pandemic has had some significant impact on the world business. But just as maybe before I answer your question about how we change our business in the US, I just want to give you, a couple of point of view about how the pandemic is affecting the world and how some of that recovery is happening. If you look at China, for example, today, the Shanghai subway system is back to about 95% of pre-COVID traffic. You're talking about a subway system that has about 13 million daily riders, and that's back to 95%, Domestic travel, in China is back to levels that are much stronger than what we have in the US. So, there is a life after the pandemic. That's my message, and I'm kind of looking at the glass half full rather than half empty. But to answer your question about how we've changed, or adapted to the business in this year, really, I think for me the keyword has been flexibility and agility as well. Obviously, we've had to work with all our agency partners, media specialists, and clients to help them ride these challenging times. And really, if there is one word or one way we've addressed the business this year, it's really being more flexible and working along our long-standing partners in the business.
Do you think that whole idea of flexibility will be something that becomes part of your DNA permanently going forward at JCDecaux?
Well, you're assuming that it was not before.
Okay, more flexible than even before.
Yes. No. Look, it will have a long-lasting impact. And I know that we'll be touching on the subject of programmatic, but programmatic brings a whole set of flexibility as well. Even though it's a very small share of our business so far as an industry, it's one of the key assets that it brings to clients. So yes, it will definitely have an impact into 2021 and maybe very well beyond as well.
Great. Hey, Jody, you're the CMO of OUTFRONT. You certainly have a point of view on where the industry is heading right now. What are you saying about out of home generally to the marketplace when you do talk about the business holistically?
I think the three headlines for our sector right now are audiences are back, we are a brand safe medium, and the fundamentals are as strong as ever. And to add a little bit of color to each of those headlines, I think we all know the audiences are back. We have the analytics and the data points to prove it. And as an industry sector, I think we put out pretty good news on a week in and week out basis. Highways are back, street level is back. Transit still a little bit challenged. One of our properties is the New York subway system. And I think the low of 8% ridership in April is now up to about 31%. So a significant.
Wow.
Yeah. And when you look at raw numbers, that's 1.8 million passengers a day, which is 2 or 3 times as large as the next largest transit system in the US on its best day. And I think that's equivalent to the ridership of the London Underground on a pre-COVID day. So still a significant audience. I think that brand safety in 2020 is about a lot more than just the COVID experience. It's about social injustice. It's about a contentious election. I think that brands are hard pressed to find any channel or media that feels brand safe right now. So I think we have a really good opportunity to provide safety to brands who request, require, demand that. And I think as far as the fundamentals are concerned, we've been talking for years about brand fame and creative and a lot of the fundamental strengths of the medium. The way I like to contextualize it now is to take a page out of the tech stocks, right? FANG, F-A-A-N-G, and to Jean-Luc's point, flexibility, amplification, attribution, national scope, and geo-targeting, what we can do at that very regional level with contextual messaging to be very, very site or location specific.
Hey, Tommy, Lamar has a huge footprint. You're in lots of markets and lots of places. What sort of support or problem solving are your clients asking for right now from your people?
It's really interesting because, now we have such a huge mix of local markets and mid-size and small markets, as well as a presence in, and of course, the national arena as well. And when this thing first hit, we immediately circled up in the boardroom, and it was Kevin and Sean, John Miller, myself, our regional managers, our territory managers, and we realized that, having gone through a lot of crisis before, because we live in, if there's a hurricane anywhere, it's hitting the Lamar market. We're used to having to deal with problems, big problems. And we learned a few things. We learned that you've got to play the hand that's dealt you. And we were determined that we were going to follow a few guidelines. One is, we were going to be incredibly sensitive to what was going on with our client base, because we know it's frightening for them and it's times of uncertainty, and they're looking for something that's controllable, and we have to be there to help them with that. And then second, that if we do anything, we had to learn how to really over communicate with our clients, and especially over communicate with our people, because that's the one thing that would make a difference as we move forward in the future. And so with our clients, we realized that probably the first thing they were going to do is either want to pivot by shifting, pausing, or canceling. And that was a very real object that was in our line of sight. So what we did is we immediately brought our people together. We did it with videos, and we said, look, this is what we're going to do. In these next 2-3 weeks, we want you to make contact with every one of your clients. Don't be afraid that they're going to ask to cancel. Explain to them that we're going to be there with them. We're all in this problem together. And so what we're going to do is, whatever the level of impressions we promised them in the beginning, those are the level of impressions we're going to deliver. And if it means we've got to take 2 or 3 weeks longer to do it than what we had originally contracted for, that's okay. They're going to get exactly what they pay for. The next thing was, we had to make sure that our AEs had to learn a completely new way of selling. I mean, for the first time, they were not going to be able to go eyeball to eyeball with people. It was going to be more like inside selling, working remotely. So we immediately went back and started retraining our sales force on how to be effective by working with the clients on the phone and working remotely. Exactly how do you open those conversations? Exactly how do you make those presentations when you have to do it over a Surface Pro or an iPad? And how do you close those situations? And then we took Salesforce, which is a platform that we use, and every week we focused on a vertical market. Let's say it was political. And with that vertical market we focused on, we loaded up all the leads into the Salesforce in all our different markets of everybody that was running for some type of office. And then we immediately generated a drip campaign from the individual AEs with their name on it to those clients, talking about the benefits of out of home in political. Stephen and Christina, you'd be glad to know, using all the OAAA information that you guys had loaded us up with. And as those clients began to open up their emails and read it, it immediately put it onto our AE's task list to contact the client because they've shown interest. And then with the AEs, we trained them on how to sell political, on how to open the conversation, what the benefits are, how to follow up with the proposals that we'd already prepared for them, and then how to close effectively after they made that presentation. And then we put a lot of rewards in place. We did a lot of recognition. Our sales op force with John Miller and Cheryl Zimmerman and that group, they put together daily dashboards so that we knew on a daily basis what was being sold by the company, by the region, by the territory, by the individual plant and who the star AEs were. And once a week, we were able to recognize who the superstars were against those vertical markets, bring them recognition, find a way to reward them. And then next week, pop out another vertical market and do the same thing again. So we decided from the very beginning, it wasn't going to be a setback. It was going to be a setup.
Wow.
And we were being set up to pivot and sell in a way that we never had before, but would be the way of the future anyway. And we were going to come out of it better. And it's exciting. It went much better than we expected. And that is simply because out in that field, our GM, sales managers, territory managers, and regionals, they know how to lead sales teams. And our job is just to make sure they have the right materials to do that. So our clients, I think, probably received more care and comfort in this period than they ever had before.
Wow, thank you, Tommy. That's really great. Really appreciate your deep insight on really this sales strategy that you guys put in place. It's really important. You guys have such direct sales relationships. It's really wonderful that you guys really thought that through, and thank you for sharing that. Hey, Dan, so how do you think the business has profoundly changed this year? What are some of the biggest shifts or changes in our business you've noticed?
I think it's actually accelerated changes that were already in process of happening. If you think about it, our customers, they all transact for billboards, but they're not really buying billboards. They're buying a way to deliver a message to specific audiences to drive those audiences to take certain actions. In other words, they're focusing on audiences and the outcomes they want to see. And I think that's the accelerated change that we're seeing coming out of COVID is we as an industry are now realizing that just selling locations and inventory doesn't address the problems that our customers really have. It's created an urgency around consultative selling, exactly as Tommy was talking about, forcing our salespeople to ask questions before they recommend the solutions. And really critically, it's elevating the role of data to be able to connect. We all talk about the art and science of out of home. And now I think what's really truly happening is the separation between the data and the creative is getting closer and closer together, because ultimately what we're focusing on is if we can deliver provable, measurable solutions to our customers, it shouldn't matter the form or the format of the advertising. It shouldn't be about channels. It should be about the outcomes. And so I'm seeing that accelerate for a lot of reasons. Obviously, programmatic is helping on that. All the great work that's being done by our industry, by all the companies represented here in terms of creating data products is certainly helping. But I think it's more along the lines of what Tommy was getting at, is we're changing behaviors and we're getting people to think about our medium as a key part of the mix, as opposed to a siloed medium that's always been supported. The reality is we can't rely upon that support in the way that we had to before. So now we got to proactively sell. And the way to do that, the way to create demand, is to better understand the problems that we can solve that our customers have.
Right on. Absolutely right. Hey, Esther, so what about you? How are you thinking about this year and you're not new to Intersection, but you're new to the role, CMO. How are you thinking about communicating to the marketplace the value of your company and the value of the out-of-home medium in general?
So think about when we first started Shelter in Place, right? Like, what was that one moment of your day that brought you joy? And I know my answer is very similar to many people, and it was going outside, right? That walk outside, running in essential errands. It was getting outside of those four walls that you were in all day. And as we've gone through those phases of this pandemic, you've seen people take to living their life outside in a new kind of way, right? Obviously, we feel safest there, but we also are happier there. We have a new appreciation for that, and we're more engaged when we're there. So you're seeing outdoor dining. In New York yesterday, it was announced that storefronts can push to the street, to the curb, right? We're walking and biking more than ever before. And people are noticing out of home, or part of that journey is on premise with us while you're doing those activities. So what I would say to a brand or to a marketer is, if you're not thinking about out of home right now, you're making a critical mistake. If you are buying a mobile and desktop only strategy, you're reaching people when they're really reluctant, right? Like, think about Saturday night when you get that iPhone alert that says your screen time report. That puts a pit in my stomach. Like, I know the phone knows what I've done. The phone knows how long I've been on it, right? we don't feel good about that. And the OAAA actually released a study a couple of weeks ago that had two really relevant stats. The first is that 68% of consumers are completely tuning out desktop and mobile ads. They are at full capacity, total screen fatigue. And on the other side, 69% of consumers that live in urban areas are feeling like they notice out of home as more than ever and more than pre-pandemic. So I would say out of home is more relevant than ever, more powerful than ever. It's a part of that like breath of fresh air.
Hear, hear, absolutely,
Yeah.
for sure. Hey, let's pause a minute, guys, and let me ask you a sort of a quick rapid fire question. I'm going to each of you ask each of you kind of in a word. And how would you describe 2020 thus far? We've heard your intro, so in a word, how would you describe 2020 thus far? Jody?
I think in a single word, I'd say transformational.
Oh, very positive. How about you, Jean-Luc?
It's hard to describe in one word because I think that this pandemic has had such a massive impact on so many levels. There is in every crisis, there is some positive that comes out of it. I mean, you know the saying, I mean, never let a good crisis go to waste.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm very conscious of the impact that it's had on so many businesses, so many families. So, there is a side of me that always look at the glass half full, but I know that, in our industry, there's been some, great suffering. So I want to be very mindful of that as well. So I'm sorry, I don't have a one word for you. I'm optimistic about the future because, as I said before, we know that when the audience are coming back, the business is back. I mean, and if we look again at our experience in Europe, in France and Germany, as soon as we were out of the lockdown, the business came back to pre-COVID level, to 2019 levels.
Wow.
So, there is light at the end of the tunnel, obviously, and I that's my focus. I want to be very positive of that, but I want to be very mindful as well about how the world has changed or is changing until that point that we go on the other side and of the tunnel. So,
all right. Well, we're gonna assign optimism to you.
Yeah. Yes, I always am.
Hey, Dan, what about you? You have a word?
I don't know if it's technically a word, but in the house that I grew up in, it was oi. Like, this has been a hell of a year. Like, I'm transformational. I'm feeling optimistic for sure, but just, oh my God, when is 2021? Yeah.
How about you, Esther?
I'm in line with Dan. I'm going with a pop culture word, canceled. Moving on.
Canceled, moving on. Tommy, you got a word?
Yeah, defining. I think there are only few opportunities in our lifetimes where we face real crisis. And I think how we react to that really defines us. And there are not that many opportunities that come along. And so as Jean-Luc was saying, it was transformational. But the real question is, how do you react to what happens in these situations?
Right. And
I think it's been a real learning experience.
Yeah.
And there goes my dog.
Okay. Hey, Christina, I'm going to bring you in the conversation too. Do you have a word you want to share?
Yeah, well, I agree with all of these words, but I'm going to say pivotal. I think that we've all pivoted our businesses. Tommy gave a great example of that. Think about the small business owners and the restaurants and what they've been required to do to pivot on their business. How we communicate as colleagues has completely changed in some ways. I know that our colleagues felt closer than ever through this process because we communicated face to face more than we ever have. So pivotal is my word.
Pivotal, great. Listen, I want to change so that's COVID. I want to change the topic a little bit and talk about planning and use of digital, some really important things happening in our business right now. So, hey, Dan, how have your clients adjusted to, their out-of-home planning this year in terms of how they're doing things maybe differently? We've talked about your companies, your businesses, the out-of-home operations themselves, but what about the clients? How has planning changed?
So there's a lot of talk in the press about shorter lead times and need for more flexibility, all of which is really, really true and valid. I think the thing that I'm noticing more than anything is an openness and an accessibility. I've had more meetings with CMOs over the last 9 months than I've had over the 4 years before that. There are people out there that recognize that their business need new solutions and they have problems, real fundamental problems. Many of them the group has talked about, the small businesses that are really struggling through no fault of their own. And so they're open to new ideas and looking for new ways of working. And so I think that idea of thinking about out of home, not as a tactical siloed medium, but as a strategic part of the integrated mix of solutions that a marketer has access to, I'm really seeing that as a positive change coming out of this. And we're having discussions that don't involve inventory, don't involve pricing, they don't get into the spots and dots side of things. We're having discussions about what we're seeing out in the world, the challenges that people are having, whether you're talking about the consumer challenges, the challenges that any of the panelists that have small kids, you're dealing with, like remote education as an example of a real challenge that companies are trying to solve. I think that's been a real positive change. And I hope, to the discussion we had before, I hope it's a sustained change. I hope this is something that continues, that CMOs, more marketers start to see that out of home shouldn't be something that we've all had this. You meet with someone and they say, oh, that's great, talk to my agency. We work with agencies. Agencies are a fundamental part of what we do. They're key partners for us. But if we can't understand the marketers' challenges and the business problems they're trying to solve, we can't do our jobs effectively. And it feels like these days, it's easier for us to have that conversation.
Yeah. Jody, do you feel the same way? What are you seeing in terms of?
I think I agree with what Dan just said, and I'm just going to further that. Right now we're in the middle of 2020, so it's a current event. In a lot of ways, it's quite painful. When 2020 becomes a historical perspective, I think we're going to see it a lot differently. And some of the pivoting to reference Christina's word, I think will become structural, and I think it will have good benefit and impact long-term. And some of the things that Dan is saying is both because brands and local businesses both are open to the conversations on how we can partner and consult and help them. But I think the other piece to it is doing so much of this virtually is just easier for people. The minute, if you want to grab a CMO, they'll have 45 minutes because they're not so hard pressed in their office. There's not the commute. There's a certain relaxed ability to converse with people that I don't think we've ever seen before. And I think some of those bits and pieces structurally are going to help our business in the long term. Even attending conferences at this point, you can tune in and tune out at your leisure without having obligating to a plane ticket and a hotel stay and 3 days out of a busy schedule. So I just think that there's a innate opportunity in all this that will be structurally defining in how we comport our business models going forward. And I think in terms of talking to brand managers, strategy teams, CMOs, that the basis that we're laying down now with these conversations is going to bode well for us, for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, and that's such a good point, Jody, because the other real strength of sort of the Zoom or digital platforms is that more people can become involved and engaged that may not have been able to fly to that location to participate. Yeah, it's true. Bigger audiences. So Esther, how are you seeing sort of digital capabilities changing? How is the pandemic sort of alter the way people are thinking about digital out of home as a platform?
Certainly it's able to move in real time, right? So you can react to what's going on in the world around you and give the consumers real-time information. Certainly we've all seen on our networks, the government and cities running information to help consumers during the pandemic. We've seen brands respond to it. So certainly those capabilities have been a core piece of what we're seeing during the pandemic. But in terms of a brand using it in a great big way, I think one of the most emotionally charged deals I've ever worked on is a partnership that we did during the pandemic our friends at Facebook and our friends at Kinetic called Power the Comeback. And we've all talked a lot on this call about small businesses and the need to help them get back on their feet. Facebook funded a digital ad bank and handpicked the businesses that they wanted to help support in major cities around the country. The beauty of digital is you were able to put it right outside these stores when the stores are open or within close proximity to it with real-time messaging, right? And I think the emotional outpouring from these business owners and the real results that they've seen have been tremendous. I know there was also a programmatic piece to their small business effort, which many of us have seen across our networks. And I think that's also a taste of what's to come in terms of digital, seeing some direct buys that also have programmatic overlays.
Yeah. Hey, Tommy, Lamar has a huge digital billboard footprint across the country, almost every state. How have you guys seen brands use your digital assets differently since COVID-19 hit us?
Wow. In some ways, it's been business as usual.
Interesting.
And yeah, I mean, it really has. I think that they love the flexibility that they have now and out of home, particularly, with our digital panels. But I find that the business has really kind of continued almost in the same manner that it has in the past. I don't think I've really seen any big surprises.
Has anyone seen any real good examples of how sort of messaging has pivoted or changed?
I saw something today actually that I thought was pretty cool. Absolute has digital billboards in all the swing states, and I wrote it down, so I'm going to read it. Your vote can shake or stir the election, with their logo, vote first, drink second. And I thought that was a great proof point of the nimbleness of digital, and not COVID really based, but more election based. So contextual relevance, the ability to go into a specific region or location and just be really smart in aligning a brand to a important message at this point in time.
Yeah. So true. It's amazing how out of home can really become, because of digital integration, has become so relevant to real-time messages.
And Steve, I'll just add to that. I am sure that either they did it with the purpose or the thought that there'd be lots of social amplification around it.
Yeah.
And, guaranteed I saw it on an Instagram feed. So, check mark that box for them. So I thought it was super smart.
Really smart.
Can I just, not in any way taken away from the discussion about digital, I also think it's worth calling out, though, that for the just thousands and thousands and thousands of printed traditional billboards that are out there, we've also had those same discussions with customers, right? Our customers more than ever have needed help from us from a creative standpoint. And so whether it's changing that messaging dynamically or doing it in real time, or just changing your bulletin or your poster messaging, I think it's worth acknowledging that we as an industry have done a heck of a job of helping our customers manage through this and recognize that as their business change, out of home can be there with them to help tell consumers about how their businesses are changing, whether that's closing down and opening up or evolving from in-person eating to takeout and delivery, or like the real, like think back, it feels like a lifetime ago. Back in March and April, much of what was happening in our media was about like health and wellness directions to consumers, about how to stay safe, about wait times at hospitals and things like that. I just think it's been a really great experience to illustrate the power of the medium to be a part of the conversation, whether it's printed and posted or digitally served.
That's a great point, Dan. And media companies today, out-of-home media companies, do such a great job in facilitating printed or static campaigns in a very, very quick, efficient way. And we don't want to lose sight of that it is still a very powerful platform.
David, can I add something to what Dan just said? Because I think that we do lose sight of that. And I'm sure that Dan and Esther and Jean-Luc and Tommy will all attest to that. We have never in any period in our histories received so many requests for PSAs. And I think that is because every organization out there understood that if they wanted to get messaging out to communities, we were the best mouthpiece or broadcast medium to do that. And I think that all of us as an industry, buyers, sellers, everybody, should feel really proud about how Out of Home showed up with purpose over these last 8 months, from CDC messaging to all our individual hashtag thank you messaging. I know we've all done that for local heroes and essential workers. We've all had different local stimulus packages as markets began to reopen to help those local businesses get back on their feet. So I think just over the calendar, over the months, we just keep on showing up in a really good community-minded way. And I think we should all feel pretty proud about that.
Effectiveness, pass it on. Hey, Jean-Luc, let me shift topics a little bit here. Let me ask you, are there any segments or categories specifically that you think have done a really great job utilizing the out-of-home industry during the pandemic?
You know, it's interesting because when we look at that, I'm going to try to answer it in two ways, because obviously in all our businesses, you know, one part of our business is national and one part of our business is local. And our local business, you know, after the shelter in place, you know, has been quite resilient in coming back. And it's quite interesting because when I talk to our sales team in our market of New York and Chicago, it's really nice to be able to see our team doing the job that they have to do. And if you go to the Bronx today, the streets are packed, you know, because all those local businesses are back open. And it's quite interesting, you know, when you look at what goes on with the national business, which, you know, to some degree has probably been a little bit more affected, like our movie clients, which right now they're not allowed basically to, you know, launch movies since the movie theaters are still closed. We know it. So the local business has been quite resilient, and it's quite active right now. And nationally, I mean, besides some obvious categories, which are healthcare, obviously, you know, they've got a big role to play now in what is happening. And streamers, you know, being, you know, the usual suspect, you know, of streaming movies or music. I mean, those guys have been quite active, and obviously their business has skyrocketed through this pandemic. But outside of that, there is still one category which has continued to grow despite the pandemic, which is the D2C brands. Already before the pandemic, we saw those brands coming, you know, to our industry as a whole new category. You know, in a matter of a year or two, they came and all of a sudden they started popping up everywhere. And it's quite interesting because all of a sudden we start dealing with companies and you go like, who are those people? I've never heard of them, because obviously they've only been in the digital ecosystem, and we don't necessarily know all the brands, but it's really a brand new category for us that keeps on growing. And I think with that, it brings a new set of challenge and opportunities for us, because it's a whole new ecosystem that flourishes despite the pandemic. Their business is all online, it's not brick and mortar, and their business right now, as we know it, e-commerce, online sales are really going through the roof. So we do capitalize on that, obviously. But at the same time, it brings a whole new set of challenges, because those people, those brands are used to new metrics when it comes to performance, you know, and they start talking about ROI, and they know, you know, when they use online advertising, that for every dollar that they spend online, they know exactly how much, you know, they get back as their return on investment. So it's a great opportunity for us to keep on developing what we as an industry, I know we've already done, but to develop attribution, and also develop new solutions to measure web visitation, sales, you know, online. Besides just obviously those brands, they want brand lift, you know, because the brand awareness is not quite there, and they need to expand beyond online, and so they need to make a name for themselves. And the way for them to make a name for themselves is to go on the street and really, you know, broach beyond online, where probably now they are saturating. I mean, I'm sure that if those marketers are looking at their investment online and they said, oh, we've kind of done that, been there, done that, and saturated our investment. So we need to find a way a cost-effective way, an efficient way for us to be able to keep on growing our business. And those sets of challenge for us are great because attribution is all part of the game now, measurements, ROI, whichever way you want to call it, but look at those key metrics of, web visitation, sales online, app downloads. I mean, these are the new challenge that we have already faced, and we have already some solutions. I'm not saying that we have all the answers to everything, but we definitely have all together work towards these new challenges that will also work for the traditional big blue chip company with brick and mortar retail as well.
Yeah, very true. So we've had a few other questions come in, very similar to what you're talking about, Jean-Luc, asking if there are any other. You mentioned D2C, but if any of you, the rest of you, have seen any sort of surprise advertising categories that have seemed to really tick up during the pandemic. Are there other sort of pleasantly surprising categories that you've the rest of you have sort of seen? Or
I don't know if I would say it was surprising. I think what we've seen is consistent with how out-of-home has always performed, which is we're a part of the community. And as the community goes through changes and evolves, things become more relevant. So I think we've all benefited from the fact that people are sheltering at home. So home improvement, home sales, everything around the world that we're now living in has picked up as activity for us. I don't think it's surprising. I think it's actually positive because it continues to reinforce the value that we make. If you think about it, we're the only medium that's literally a physical part of the community, right? People see us, they travel around the world, we're part of that experience. And so as their worlds change, we evolve with them. I think it's been a real positive there.
Out of home is real.
I agree with Dan on that. It's even the small things with homeschooling. Suddenly there's a lot of tutoring services and online services with the rapid pace of pet adoption, that whole pet and pet aftermarket category. People suddenly were eating 21 meals a week at home as opposed to 3 or 4 dinners while they were eating breakfast and lunch at the office. So suddenly lots of food specialty stores and grocery and supermarkets. So to Dan's point, it just like in all times, as people evolve the way they live their lives, so does the local advertising and national messaging out there. The increase in perhaps drinking at home, we've seen some benefit of that. So it's just aligned with how we live our lives. And I think as marketers, our job is to get ahead of those trends and to psych out what the next one's going to be, and then to help our AE teams and our clients approach them with the right ideas and the right consultative approach.
Right. Well said. Esther, let me turn to you and again change the topic a little bit to programmatic. We've all sort of been talking a little bit about programmatic this afternoon in responses, but specifically about programmatic. How are you and how is Intersection really sort of balancing those conversations with clients about programmatic out of home, what it can do, what it can't do, what it offers, how it's similar to online, how it's different?
From our POV, it's not really as much about balancing as it is having those two separate conversations, right? One is with this net new audience, people that we didn't necessarily speak to 5 years ago that are opening new streams of revenue for us. And the second is deepening our relationships with our out-of-home specialists and being there to help them learn more about programmatic and being ready to activate with them. It's just a new way of buying for new and existing customers that I think we all on the phone feel very bullish about.
Yeah. Who else is seeing some or who else are having different kinds of conversations about out of home with programmatic as a core element of the conversation?
For a moment, I think that again, very bullish on programmatic. I think the opportunity is tremendous. Digital out of home and programmatic throughout this time period give a lot of advertisers a lot of confidence in actually reinvesting in the space because of the flexibility it offers. And again, attribution and data-driven planning are sort of built into them inherently. So again, other things like, as Jean-Luc was saying, attribution is a big part of, proving out the effectiveness, and we certainly need to make sure we take advantage of that moving forward. So again, I think it's going to be a big on-ramp for reinvestment in the space.
Yeah, absolutely.
Stephen, I think when you look at the numbers, I think the eMarketer report was that in 2015, programmatic was a $17 billion revenue generator. In 2019, that was 60 billion. So as a sector, as an industry, it certainly feels like that is a space we want to be procuring dollars from, and new dollars indeed.
But it's also worth calling it, like, I think we're all seeing programmatic as far as national advertising seems to be coming back faster and more scale, for all the reasons we've talked about, flexibility, dynamic, all that. But it's important to keep in mind, this isn't a new business, or it's not a new product. It's a new channel, and it's a new way of conducting business. And all the work that we've done as an industry to bring flexibility, speed to market, and data solutions, those are required for us to be able to capitalize on the demand and the growing demand from programmatic. So there's definitely a difference between a direct sale and a programmatic sale. What's really critical is that we coordinate them, because it's one customer. And if a customer chooses to transact programmatically, we've all put in place the means to be able to deliver for them. It's not our job to direct them to, you should be buying direct versus you should be buying programmatically, but rather to respond and understand why an advertiser feels that programmatic is the right channel for them. And obviously the thing that's really driving that today, beyond speed and reactiveness, is the data, to be able to really understand the effectiveness so that you continue to optimize. And what we're all doing collectively to focus on attribution and insights, I think will continue to accelerate the growth of programmatic, because we demonstrate that it works, not in a silo, not in a PowerPoint report, but through the data that we provide back for them to really truly understand the connection between that activity and their sales performance.
Yeah, well, that's a good point.
Can I just get to Dan's comment? Because I think that also reinforces how doubly important it is for us as an industry now to get to the strategy table, because you do need to affect the strategy before the buying channel or the buying process becomes defined. So I think that's kind of beholden on all of us to make sure that we are moving further up the food chain to impact strategy.
And Christina, you and I were talking earlier in the week, the fact that at OMG, right, your previous company, that the out-of-home buying and planning, parts of the business are integrating more and more upstream in the agency into the strategy groups, right?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Very much getting a seat at the table because of the tremendous amount of work we've done with, developing case studies, using data-driven planning. And when I say that, it's not just necessarily with programmatic. There's so much great data available to us that we're using for traditional and printed formats. And we're actually doing so many attribution studies against those buys as well. So it's certainly by no means just a programmatic story at all. And, again, I applaud the companies here who have done great work in that space and have reached out and really become very accessible, leading and sharing all sorts of different data tools and attribution tools as well to help deliver, again, these great results that we're able to bring back to clients and advertisers, because that's what moves the needle, is really just sort of the evidence and the proof.
Well, it sounds like the real sort of deal changer here, or the real change agent for the industry, isn't so much programmatic as it is data and the way we use data. Dan, what are the opportunities you think moving forward with data, and how do you think data can or will sort of accelerate interest in the medium, get current buyers and planners to spend more in the medium, get non-users to look at the medium in a more serious way? Will data help us do that, and how?
So let me answer that indirectly, and apologize if you guys have heard me say this before, but I feel real strongly about this. Our product isn't the billboard. It doesn't matter whether it's static or printed or whatever we want to call it, or digital. Our product work with us. They spend money with us to reach, engage, and influence people. And so without the data, it's hard for us to really answer those questions. There's a reason why we've all created data products that don't just apply to the digital inventory. That would be such a mistake for us as an industry to equate data with digital out of home. It has to be something. It has to. I'm going to bastardize this, but it's a cliche at this point that data is the oil that keeps the machine running. Like, I really truly believe that. We have to be thinking about data not as a tool, but as a real key to understanding insights into audience behavior. So I think it'll not only accelerate the growth, not just the programmatic, but the return of more and more brands to the traditional printed billboards, but it should open up so many doors for new conversations. The most common response that I get when I sit with a marketer and explain what's happening in out of home today and the capabilities as an industry, as a medium that we have, the most common reaction still, tomorrow, by the way, is my 5-year anniversary of Clear Channel. For 5 years,
Whoa.
the consistent response is, I had no idea.
Yeah.
Marketers don't understand at scale what we can do with data and how we've applied data as a fundamental part of our solutions. And so the more, to Jody's point, the more we can talk to people further up the food chain, the more that we can think of our jobs not as selling to buyers. The buyers are critically important to our business. They're our fundamental partners for us. But we have to help them by having their customers, their planners, their strategists, their creative teams understand all the value that we can bring. So when they are doing their job, speaking within the agency, there's a more receptive audience. And I think data is the key to all of that.
I would
like
add
to add
that.
something to that effect.
We're all adding to it. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, Esther. I mean, you know, when you talk to your CFO, they tell you cash is king. So I think when we talk to our data people, they, you know, or ourselves, we should say data is king.
For sure.
I was going to say that I think data is more important than ever now with all this uncertainty, right? Where are the people going? If we're not going to the office, where can we find our audience? What are these people doing? What does it mean to us in a different kind of way? And I think that we're all working on that now. How do we deliver new real-time information to our clients so that they can target the audience that they're looking for?
Yeah, I would echo that. We found that having near real-time data to be gold dust during the last 8 months, because when there was the perception that there was no audience or that there were huge missing audiences, we were able to be very granular in exactly where people were at any given moment. And that was very, very beneficial to clients, both on defense and now really on offense as we're looking toward the future.
But you know, Jody, what you said, I think it's worth pointing out, like none of us did this. But if all we did was say, here's the data, we would have hurt ourselves during the height of COVID, right? Data gave us the ability to be even more consultative. Mm-hmm. Some of our customers, the problem that they wanted us to sell was not related to their perception that there were fewer people out there. It was about their business or billing terms or being able to retain important locations during a time of transition or whatever. We all use data in a highly consultative way, and I think that's the right answer. It's a tool in the toolbox, it's not the tool in the toolbox.
Stephen, we shouldn't conclude though without talking about creative, because as awesome as data is, it would be remiss, I think, of a CMO panel not to at least acknowledge that creative is, 70% of the equation in out of home still.
Well, I mean, it's certainly, it is certainly a, if not the central component to great success is great creative. I mean, have you guys seen some great creative on the streets? Are there some examples that you thought, wow, this is really, really strong and is really, really cutting through?
I'll just reference one that it's actually one of our regional creative teams developed this a few months ago as people were starting to come out of shelter in place, is work that we did for Supercuts, where one of our regional creative leaders came up with a visual of just the most insane COVID hairdo that made such a quick read impact on Supercuts was open. You can finally deal with this massive issue of unfortunately, I haven't had that problem for a very long time, but like I thought it was just really, really good as a quick visual read to say something that everyone was dealing with, which is, can you believe what I look like? Like I have to deal with that.
Well, that reminds my favorite. I think my favorite COVID-related piece of creative was a very local client, and it ran on one of your boards. I think it might have been an OUTFRONT board. And it was a poster panel campaign, and it was for a local orthodontist, and it was just a kid close up with a big mask on, and the copy line was "best time ever for braces."
Steve, I think what you and Dad are bringing up is an important point, and one of the best things in our arsenal for retaining clients, especially at the local base, was going to them with our creative teams and saying, okay, we'll work with you and we'll pivot your creative to make it more situationally relevant to what's going on today. And Supercuts and that orthodontist are but two of many, many examples that we've seen around the country.
Yeah.
So that was a really
to your points earlier about pivoting to the moment. You know, and that's such a great, you know, we talk about programmatic, we talk about being able to pivot with digital, but being able to have the creative resources to pivot the creative message at the right moment in time is what really makes it all come together, right?
And Dan touched on it too, you know, local restaurants, instead of come eat here, it was curbside pickup, it was home delivery, it was, you know, whatever it might be. So very fundamental to keeping the local marketplace in a good place.
And just a side note to everyone, get excited and ready for the OB Awards CFE about to launch next week.
That's great.
Before we move on, I would add to creative content that we've all seen running on screens, right? Not only brands using the platform to convey really special and important messages and using creative in a big way. Certainly at Intersection, one of my favorite pieces of creative that is run on our content platform is our partnership with Foursquare. So showing people and using data and creative, here we go, marriage of our two last segments, to show people the lines at grocery stores and drugstores, right? That was one of the worst experiences of this whole time, having to wait online for your food, but using creative and marrying it with data to get that message out on the streets. I think we've all done a lot of that as well.
Yeah, for sure. It just really demonstrates the true intrinsic value of our medium, and our medium has certainly been one that has provided tremendous value to brands, I think, through this pandemic. Well, you know, we're getting close to the hour, which is unfortunate because we have so much more to talk about. I mean, I have more questions for you, and there's so many more topics and conversations we can have. Maybe we'll have to invite you all back before too long to carry on this conversation, because I know the audience has really enjoyed hearing from all of you today. Before we go, though, I do want to ask one more question, sort of in one sentence or phrase or word. Each of you, tell me sort of where you're kind of placing your bets for 2021. You know, what do you see happening, and what's 2021 hold for your companies, for you, and for our business? Jody, 2021, you're first.
Okay, so I would say audiences, advertisers, Broadway, and baseball.
Broadway and baseball.
Wow.
That's the American dream, right? Hey, Esther, how about you?
I'm going to end where I started, the continuing of living your life outdoors, embracing everything around you, including out of home, and targeting the audiences in the neighborhoods where people live.
Right, absolutely. Tommy?
People, our people. I really feel like the difference that we will experience, you know, at least within Lamar, is going to be the way that our people have pivoted and adjusted to what's going on.
Dan?
Say from a business, it was what I mentioned a little earlier, audiences and outcomes. I think that focus will drive the business next year and beyond. On a personal level, I'm with Tommy. I miss people. We've been working in the office now for the last couple of months, and it's just been great to actually see people, to talk to people, even if you have to have a mask on. And then just for me, even more personal, I miss live music. So I'm really looking to
Broadway, and concerts.
100%.
And we'll come over and sing to you.
Yeah. Jean-Luc, what do you think? Jean-Luc?
Well, I will take a different angle to what my friends here have said, and I will say, can you ask me that question after November 3rd?
Maybe we should do this on November 4th again, right? Exactly.
But
Christina, do you have a thought on that? A final thought?
Yeah, I mean, just from listening to this panel, which has been just excellent, I'm going to say optimism. I think that I've heard so much optimism here, and I think there's so much opportunity for our businesses and for out of home to grow its revenue share based upon all the things that we heard today. And Esther, I really appreciate you kind of pulling in that real key point about data and creativity working together, because I think that's always a home run for out of home.
Well, listen, I want to thank Jody, Jean-Luc, Dan, Tommy, Esther, and of course, having Christina with us here for your time today. It's been terrific. It's been a wonderful conversation. Everyone out there, remember that we record all these sessions. So later this afternoon, this session will be available in the OAAA lunch break library, which you can access at OAAA.org. It's on our homepage. So go back and listen to it again. It was great information. Or if you have friends and colleagues who may have missed it, please advise them to take a listen to this terrific panel. We'll close out.
Could we take a moment to thank you? I think that everybody on this panel wants to acknowledge and thank you for being our fearless leader for 20 some odd years, that you've been an inspiration. As Christina said, you are going to be very big shoes to fill. But I just want to say you couldn't have picked a better time to retire. So smart move, my friend. But I just want to acknowledge, and I know my co-CMOs do as well, your contribution, your leadership, and your friendship over these years. So thank you.
100%.
Thank you.
Standing ovation.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you very
Everybody
much. Well, listen, thank you. That's very sweet. I appreciate that. So these are the CMOs. We're going to hear from the CROs next week on November 5th. So please tune in for that. Everyone have a really terrific day, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye, y'all.